Amelia Hayes never imagined her life would spiral into a whirlwind of heartbreak, betrayal, and a struggle for survival so profound it defied words. One fateful night, cast out onto the cold, unforgiving streets of New York City, she found herself in the throes of labor, alone in a desolate alley, with no help in sight. Her millionaire ex-partner, Ethan Vanderbilt, was nowhere to be found. Yet destiny had other plans. Months later, they would come face to face again, but this time under the glaring lights of a courtroom, with the relentless echo of a judge's gavel thundering in the background. Prepare for an unforgettable journey entwined with secrets, scandals, and a relentless quest for justice that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Amelia Hayes had grown accustomed to the noises of the city, the blare of taxi horns, the wail of distant sirens, and the electric hum of street lamps casting an eerie glow. But on this particular night, every sound felt amplified, each one a fresh stab of fear. The biting November cold seeped through her tattered coat, chilling her to the bone. Tears, hot and stinging, streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her swollen belly, a desperate anchor in a sea of despair. She stumbled through the dark, trash-strewn alley, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, searching for any sign of help, any flicker of human kindness. Her mind raced, consumed by a single, frantic question. Where is Ethan? He had promised, with words like spun sugar, to be there for her, to protect her and their unborn child. But as her due date loomed, the phone calls dwindled and then stopped altogether. The texts, once so full of affection, never came. The man who once swore his undying love, who had painted a future of shared dreams, vanished without a trace, like a phantom. At first, Amelia believed he was merely busy, consumed by the demanding affairs of Vanderbilt Industries. Ethan was, after all, the youngest heir to a formidable business empire, a name synonymous with power and wealth in the city. He spent his days attending endless meetings at the family firm's head office in Manhattan's financial district, dining with politicians at exclusive steakhouses, and rubbing shoulders with the elite at glittering galas in places like the Plaza. She brushed aside her gnawing doubts, clinging to the fragile idea that once his work settled, once the latest deal was closed or the newest acquisition finalized, he would return to her side, his charming smile intact. But here she was, alone, in labor, and desperately, foolishly, hoping for a miracle. The contraction hit her with brutal, unyielding force. Amelia collapsed against a graffiti-covered brick wall, gritting her teeth so hard she feared they might crack under the strain. She had no phone. It had been sold weeks ago for a pittance. She had no one to call, no friendly voice to summon. She'd pawned her last valuable possession, her grandmother's delicate locket, just to afford a few nights at a rundown motel on the city's outskirts. But now even that meager shelter was gone. She looked up and down the deserted alley, praying, pleading with a silent God that someone, anyone, might pass by. Her pleas were swallowed by the deafening roar of an approaching subway, train rumbling overhead, shaking the very ground beneath her. In that suffocating, terrifying moment, Amelia realized, with a clarity that cut through the pain, she would have to deliver her baby by herself. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her heart, but a fierce, primal maternal instinct also flooded her veins, a surge of unexpected strength. She forced herself to breathe, to remember the techniques she'd read about in a dog-eared pregnancy book months ago, in a life that now felt like a distant dream. As another agonizing contraction racked her body, Amelia screamed into the darkness, a raw, animalistic sound lost to the uncaring city. She felt the baby descending, a sensation both terrifying and utterly miraculous. With trembling hands, she removed her coat, spreading it on the cold, damp pavement, a pitifully inadequate cushion against the grime. The city's neon glow, filtering down from the towering skyscrapers, illuminated the vibrant, angry graffiti around her, and she felt for a fleeting, desperate second that this heartbreakingly surreal scene might be the end of her. But she pushed forward, fueled by a love she hadn't known she possessed, determined to bring her child into the world, no matter the cost. A sudden wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled her knees, swept over Amelia when she heard a faint, hesitant voice from the mouth of the alley. An elderly man, who introduced himself as Mr. Samuel Peterson, wearing a threadbare trench coat and a kind, worried expression, had heard her cries. Under normal circumstances, navigating the city's late-night dangers, he might have hurried on, fearful of what he might find. But something in the sound of her distress, something pure and desperate, compelled him to step forward. Crouching beside Amelia, he offered nothing more than a few soft words of encouragement in his trembling, weathered hands. He admitted, with a self-deprecating chuckle, that he knew next to nothing about childbirth. But in that moment, his simple, unadorned compassion was all Amelia needed. With Mr. Peterson's gentle help, she tore open the hem of her worn dress to fashion makeshift swaddling cloths, her mind surprisingly clear amidst the chaos. Every nerve in her body felt aflame, stretched to its breaking point. She let out a final, guttural roar, a scream that seemed to tear from her very soul. And then, finally, a new voice joined the cacophony of the night, the piercing, healthy cry of her newborn daughter. Amelia cradled the tiny, precious infant against her chest, tears of relief and exhaustion mingling with the sweat on her face. Mr. Peterson, his eyes shining with unshed tears, rummaged through his pockets, eventually producing a surprisingly clean handkerchief to gently wipe the baby's face. In the faint, flickering glow of a distant street light, Amelia gazed at her child, a rush of love so overwhelming it momentarily eclipsed the pain and desperation. She whispered a single name, a prayer and a promise. Lily. In the days that followed, Amelia's world was a fragile, precarious balancing act between survival and caring for her newborn. Mr. Peterson, true to his unassuming kindness, led Amelia to a makeshift shelter hidden beneath an overpass, a small haven run by a dedicated, underfunded nonprofit. The shelter offered warmth, a cot, and most importantly, anonymity, three things she desperately needed. She tried repeatedly to contact Ethan, but the line she had for him was constantly busy or, more often, disconnected. When she gathered the courage to call Vanderbilt Industries, she was met with polite yet dismissive secretaries who claimed, with cool professionalism, they had never heard of her. During those long, sleepless nights, while cradling Lily close, her tiny body a warm weight against her own, Amelia wondered what she had done to deserve such cruel abandonment. And yet, she clung to a slender, almost invisible thread of optimism. Ethan was a man of immense ambition, recognized as a whiz kid in the financial world, a distinguished graduate of Harvard Business School, and the subject of numerous laudatory articles in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He was often adored by the public for his carefully curated philanthropic endeavors and his undeniable charm. Amelia reasoned desperately that the man she knew gentle, caring, the one who had whispered sweet nothings in her ear couldn't have simply disappeared on purpose, couldn't have willingly forsaken her and their child. But as she discovered an outdated newspaper article tucked away in a donated magazine, featuring Ethan at the Met Gala with another woman, a glamorous socialite, on his arm, her doubts exploded into a fresh wave of shattering heartbreak. Had he truly replaced her so easily? Or was there something deeper, something more sinister at play? The shelter manager, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Sarah Miller, took pity on Amelia's evident plight. She reached out to local charities, including one run by the city's Department of Human Services, in hopes of securing more permanent assistance for Amelia and her newborn. The endless forms, the bureaucratic red tape, and the long waiting lines felt like navigating a bewildering labyrinth designed to wear down the spirit. But Amelia's determination, fueled by the sight of Lily's innocent face, never wavered. Between feedings and stolen moments of sleep, Amelia poured every ounce of energy she had into finding work. Most potential employers, however, turned her away the moment they saw her baby in tow, their expressions a mixture of pity and impatience. A sympathetic waitress position offered by a local diner was short-lived when Lily developed colic, and Amelia's frequent, necessary absences to soothe her crying daughter resulted in an abrupt, though not unexpected, termination. At night, Amelia often found herself wide awake, listening to the distant hum of late-night traffic on the FDR Drive, reliving the sweet, poignant memories with Ethan. She remembered the lavish penthouse parties at the plaza, the spontaneous weekend trips to the Hamptons, and the quiet times he used to whisper promises of a life filled with love, laughter, and security. How could that same man, the one who had held her so tenderly, leave her to fend for herself on the cold, indifferent streets of New York City? Desperation fueled her. She wrote letters, painstakingly composed, addressed directly to Ethan's personal penthouse on Park Avenue, even managing to slip one under the grand doors of Vanderbilt Industries during a daring daytime foray. Silence, heavy and absolute, remained her only reply. Behind the opulent walls of Vanderbilt Industries, Ethan's world was equally tumultuous, though in a vastly different, gilded way. After his father's sudden, shocking passing from a heart attack, Ethan found himself in the crosshairs of skeptical board members, ambitious executives, and opportunistic relatives, all of whom questioned whether he, still relatively young, had the mettle to steer the colossal Vanderbilt empire. He spent long, caffeine-fueled nights buried in financial reports and merger proposals, ironically unaware that just a few miles away, in a starkly contrasting reality, Amelia was fighting a desperate battle to keep their newborn daughter fed and warm. Whenever thoughts of Amelia surfaced, her radiant smile, her unwavering belief in him, the softness of her touch, he tried to dismiss them, to push them into the recesses of his mind. The memory of their last, bitter argument, the profound hurt etched on her face as he walked out the door, weighed heavily on him, a persistent, dull ache. Yet, he convinced himself, with the self-deception of a man under immense pressure, that he was doing the right thing by focusing solely on the business, on preserving his father's legacy. Meanwhile, Ethan's best friend and personal attorney, David Miller, cautioned him repeatedly, his voice a rare note of reason in Ethan's increasingly isolated world. If Amelia is pregnant, Ethan, you need to address it, David insisted during one of their infrequent, hurried conversations. Ignoring the possibility, or her, could lead to serious legal trouble down the road, not to mention the moral implications. But Ethan, grappling with his own insecurities, a manufactured sense of betrayal he'd conjured to justify his actions, and the overwhelming weight of corporate responsibility, brushed aside his friend's valid concerns. With the entire Vanderbilt board pressuring him to secure a profitable, game-changing merger, Ethan allowed his personal life, and Amelia, to remain an unresolved, festering mystery. Winter arrived mercilessly in New York City, the sub-zero winds cutting across the East River and leaving ice crystals like cruel diamonds in their wake. For Amelia and her baby, warmth was a precious luxury they could seldom afford. Through the nonprofit's tireless coordination, they secured a small, cramped room in a halfway house in a less-than-desirable neighborhood. The cramped space, with its flaking paint, drafty windows, and the constant noise from adjacent rooms, was far from ideal. But Amelia found a glimmer of hope, a small comfort, in having a door to lock at night, a sliver of privacy and security. Every morning, she dressed Lily in layers of donated clothes, carefully checking for warmth, before braving the frigid streets to search for any kind of work. She handed out resumes, printed on cheap paper at the local library, at fast food chains, retail stores, and even small administrative offices. Most places either ignored her application or expressed a brief, insincere sympathy before showing her the door. "We'll keep your application on file," they'd say, their eyes betraying a pity she loathed, a constant reminder of her desperate circumstances. One fateful, blustery day, after trudging through a blinding blizzard for hours, Amelia collapsed on the icy sidewalk, her body shaking uncontrollably from exhaustion and the relentless cold. A passerby named Rebecca Wallace, an off-duty social worker with a kind face and quick mind, found her, pale and unresponsive, and immediately called an ambulance. At New York Presbyterian Hospital, doctors discovered severe anemia, dehydration, and alarming signs of malnourishment. For Amelia, the clean hospital bed and the gentle, rhythmic hum of medical machines offered a fleeting, almost surreal sense of safety. Even if Lily's soft cries from the nearby nursery served as a constant, poignant reminder that they still had an enormous, uphill battle to fight. While Amelia recovered at New York Presbyterian, Rebecca Wallace, the caring social worker who had found her, visited her every day. She brought small comforts, a cozy, hand-knitted blanket for Lily, a set of new baby bottles, a warm cup of tea for Amelia, and, most importantly, offered a compassionate, non-judgmental ear. It was Rebecca who first gently, cautiously, suggested the possibility of legal counsel. "Amelia," Rebecca said one quiet afternoon, her voice soft but firm, "you have rights, and so does your daughter. If Ethan Vanderbilt is truly the father, you need to consider seeking child support or any financial help the law might provide. You can't do this all alone." The mere mention of Ethan's name triggered a fresh wave of conflicting emotions in Amelia. Anger, profound sorrow, and, buried deep beneath the layers of hurt, a glimmer of lingering, stubborn love. She had been too proud, or perhaps too frightened and overwhelmed, to consider legal action before. The very idea of dragging her once-beloved partner, the man with whom she had dreamed of a future, into a public court battle felt like another betrayal, a desecration of her hopes for a reconciled, happy family. But she had to face the stark reality. Her baby needed stability, nourishment, and a safe environment, and she was rapidly running out of ways to provide it alone. By the time Amelia was discharged, her strength slowly returning, Rebecca had connected her with a pro bono legal clinic. There, Amelia was introduced to Jessica Morgan, a determined, bright young attorney with kind eyes and a sharp mind who specialized in family law. And with that single, courageous step, the trajectory of Amelia's world began to shift, slowly but perceptibly. Jessica Morgan's office was modest, a testament to her dedication to under-resourced clients, nestled in a worn-out but respectable building housing various nonprofits. Unlike the gleaming, imposing high-rises of Vanderbilt Industries that dominated the city skyline, the space here was cramped, the paint a little faded, and the ancient elevator often broken. But Amelia immediately felt a sense of ease, a quiet comfort she hadn't experienced in months. There was an air of genuine sincerity in Jessica's posture as she gestured for Amelia to sit, offering her a cup of coffee. As Amelia recounted her story, her voice sometimes trembling, sometimes firm with resolve, Jessica listened intently, her pen flying across a yellow legal pad, occasionally pausing to ask a gentle, clarifying question. The attorney's brow furrowed with concern when Amelia described the harrowing experience of giving birth alone in an alley and the subsequent, deafening silence from Ethan. "If Ethan Vanderbilt is the father," Jessica said carefully, her tone measured but supportive, "we can pursue a paternity test, child support, and potentially more, including establishing his parental responsibilities. But," she added, her gaze direct, "you must be prepared for a fight. The Vanderbilts are powerful, extremely wealthy, and they're not going to simply roll out a welcome mat and admit fault." Fear and resolve wrestled within Amelia, a tumultuous battle in her heart. She cradled Lily, who had started to fuss, her soft cries echoing through the cramped, cluttered room. Amelia knew she was venturing into uncharted, intimidating territory, a world of court documents, legal jargon, and depositions. But she no longer had the luxury of choice. Lily's future depended on her courage. Leaving Jessica's office, Amelia felt a rush of anxious determination, a newfound strength coursing through her veins. The protective walls she'd tried to build around her heartbreak, brick by painful brick, were slowly giving way to a new, unshakable resolve. "I will fight," she whispered to herself. "I will fight for my daughter's future." The day the official, crisply typed letter arrived at Vanderbilt Industries was one Ethan Vanderbilt would never forget. The engraved envelope, bearing Jessica Morgan's name and the stark, unambiguous words, "Notice of Paternity and Child Support Hearing," landed on his polished mahogany desk with a thud that seemed to reverberate through his entire office. Ethan stared at the letter, his mind racing, heart pounding like a drum in his chest as he read through the dense legal jargon. He felt a maelstrom of emotions. Anger at the sudden, unwelcome intrusion into his carefully curated, controlled life. Guilt, sharp and undeniable, for having let things spiral so far for his cowardice. And, surprisingly, a strange, unexpected flicker of relief that at last, the question of Amelia, of their child, would be addressed, pulled from the shadows. He remembered, with a pang, how he once imagined proposing to her on a private yacht, sailing through the azure waters of the Adriatic Sea. How he had envisioned a future filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of children's feet running around a sprawling estate on Long Island. That beautiful, idyllic dream had evaporated into thin air, replaced by sterile board meetings, strategic alliances, and silent, unanswered phone calls. David Miller, Ethan's attorney and ever-loyal friend, read the document over his shoulder, his expression grave. "You need to deal with this carefully, Ethan," David warned, his voice low and serious. "If the test proves the child is yours, and let's be honest, the timing aligns, you can't ignore it. Not legally, and certainly not morally." Without responding, Ethan set the letter aside, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. He felt cornered, exposed, and yes, betrayed by his own past actions, yet he couldn't deny an inexplicable, profound ache in his chest. A child, his child, that stark, simple realization, now staring back at him in black and white, would change everything. Amelia's first court hearing was scheduled at the New York County Supreme Court. The antique, imposing architecture of the courthouse, with its towering marble pillars, echoing corridors, and hushed, solemn halls, made her feel both insignificant and strangely hopeful. She clutched Lily tightly, trying to focus on the rhythmic, gentle breathing of her baby rather than the frantic hammering of her own heart. Anxiety, like a lead weight, pinned her to her seat in the crowded, noisy waiting area. She wasn't dressed in designer clothing or accompanied by a high-powered legal entourage. All she had was Jessica, calm and reassuring, by her side, and the quiet dignity of her truth. She couldn't help but recall the glittering galas, the opulent parties she had once attended with Ethan a lifetime ago. It seemed surreal, almost unimaginable, that she was now about to face him, the man she had loved, in a formal, adversarial courtroom. When Ethan finally arrived, flanked by his own formidable legal team, Amelia felt her breath hitch in her throat. He looked every bit the polished, powerful millionaire, tailored suit, immaculate shoes, an air of cool, unshakable confidence. Yet, in his eyes, as they briefly met hers across the room, she glimpsed a flicker of something complex, something that looked a lot like regret, perhaps even pain. The hearing itself was brief, almost anticlimactic. Judge Arthur Davies, known for his stern demeanor and no-nonsense approach, listened attentively as Jessica Morgan calmly and clearly outlined the need for an immediate, court-ordered paternity test. Ethan's legal team, led by a seasoned, high-priced lawyer named Michael Preston, tried to dismiss the case as a baseless, opportunistic claim, subtly hinting at Amelia's vulnerable situation. But Judge Davies, unmoved by their tactics, ordered the test without hesitation, setting in motion the legal machinery that would forever link their fates, binding them together through their child. The paternity test results came back positive, unequivocally positive. Ethan Vanderbilt was indeed Lily's father. The news spread through the hushed, carpeted corridors of Vanderbilt Industries like wildfire, fueling hushed office gossip and shaking the family's pristine, carefully maintained public image. Ethan's stepmother, Victoria Vanderbilt, a woman known for her icy composure and social ambition, practically frothed at the mouth with indignation, convinced Amelia was nothing more than a cunning, manipulative gold digger attempting to exploit her stepson. Behind closed doors, Ethan's board of directors were not pleased either, their displeasure conveyed in curt memos and strained silences during meetings. The timing, they grumbled, could not have been worse. Vanderbilt Industries was on the cusp of closing a multi-billion-dollar deal with a major international conglomerate, and shareholders feared that any negative press, any hint of scandal, might jeopardize the delicate, high-stakes negotiations. Whispers of damage control and reputation management echoed in the executive suites, while social media buzzed with rampant rumors, wild speculation, and grainy paparazzi snapshots of Amelia leaving the courthouse. For Amelia, the test result was a bittersweet vindication. She had never doubted who Lily's father was, but seeing the official, undeniable paperwork gave her a momentary surge of courage, a small affirmation of her truth. Jessica assured her that the next steps, formalizing child support, possibly negotiating custody rights, were well within her legal claims, her position strengthened by the irrefutable DNA evidence. Still, a pang of sadness, deep and resonant, clung to her. Despite her anger and the profound hurt he had caused, a small, resilient part of her had yearned for an apology, some genuine show of remorse from Ethan that went beyond mere legal obligation or financial settlement. But for now, the fight had only just begun. As the public, I turned with voracious curiosity toward the unfolding drama. Media outlets scrambled for angles, for any salacious detail. The New York Post ran a blaring headline: "Millionaire heir Ethan Vanderbilt in shock paternity scandal." Talk shows buzzed, tabloid websites published speculative articles, and social media hashtags proliferated, dissecting every rumored detail of their past relationship. Meanwhile, Amelia found herself fending off relentless reporters who camped outside the shelter where she still sometimes volunteered, and even near the halfway house, eager to snap pictures of her with Lily, to capture the struggling single mother narrative. Jessica wisely advised Amelia to maintain her privacy, to avoid the media circus, and to focus solely on the court proceedings, but the relentless, invasive intrusion weighed heavily on her. She worried constantly about how the press would frame her story, how they would twist her motives. She was not a schemer, nor was she some naive, starstruck girl chasing a wealthy man's fortune. She was simply a mother, fighting with every fiber of her being for her child's rightful support and a chance at a decent life. Ethan, on the other hand, had spun into a crisis management frenzy, his every public move orchestrated by a team of PR experts. Michael Preston, his lawyer, arranged a discreet, off-the-record meeting with Jessica Morgan to gauge the possibility of settling out of court, to make the problem go away quietly. They proposed a substantial lump sum of money, a figure with many zeros, in exchange for Amelia relinquishing full custody of Lily, hoping to shield the venerable Vanderbilt name from ongoing scandal and public scrutiny. Amelia was appalled, sickened by the callous suggestion that she might sell her child, hand her over to a father who had been completely absent throughout her pregnancy and her daughter's critical early months. For Amelia, the lines were clear, etched in her heart. She wanted Ethan to be involved in Lily's life, to be a father in more than just name, but not at the cost of being pushed aside, treated like an inconvenient, temporary problem. A crucial turning point arrived when Jessica scheduled a formal mediation session. The goal was to see if a compromise, any middle ground, could be reached without dragging the deeply personal matter through a drawn-out, potentially damaging public trial. The sterile, impersonal conference room in the courthouse annex felt suffocating, its white walls seeming to echo even the slightest shuffle of papers, the nervous clearing of a throat. Amelia sat on one side of the long, polished table with Jessica, her expression composed but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan, flanked by Michael Preston and another junior lawyer from his firm, occupied the other side, his face a mask of carefully constructed neutrality. The mediator, a soft-spoken, experienced woman named Olivia Chun, explained the process, her voice calm and professional. "We're here today to see if there's a middle ground, she said, her gentle tone attempting to melt some of the icy tension that filled the room. Amelia expected Ethan to open with a tirade, an accusation, or perhaps a condescending lecture. Instead, he surprised her, his voice barely above a whisper, a stark contrast to his usual confident boardroom demeanor. I never meant for it to get to this. He began haltingly, his gaze fixed on the tabletop, avoiding her eyes. I thought you moved on. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know you were homeless or struggling so badly. If I had known, He trailed off, his eyes flickering with an emotion Amelia couldn't quite decipher, but it looked like genuine guilt. For a fleeting second, Amelia felt her heart soften, a flicker of the old tenderness. She recalled the gentle, considerate man he once seemed to be, the man who never hesitated to hold her hand in public, who spoke with such earnestness of building a family someday, of a future together. But then she remembered the searing labor pains, the cold, filthy alley, the desperate, hungry nights, and a gnawing fear for Lily's survival. That stark, brutal memory hardened her resolve. A real apology, one that acknowledged the depth of his betrayal, wasn't enough. She needed a sincere, actionable commitment to her and, more importantly, to Lily's well-being. The mediation session ended hours later without a definitive resolution. Ethan insisted, repeatedly, that he wanted to be part of Lily's life, to be a father to her. But Michael Preston, ever the pragmatist, recommended that Amelia relinquish primary physical custody in exchange for a generous, ironclad financial compensation package and liberal visitation rights. Amelia stood firm, her voice quiet but unshakable, refusing to let Ethan come and go at will, to be a part-time father, without shouldering true, consistent parental responsibility. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of media photographers snapped pictures, their flashes like attacking fireflies, capturing the tension etched on Amelia's face and the visible discomfort in Ethan's posture. Headlines spun wildly across news sites and social media feeds. Vanderbilt love child sparks heated custody battle. Mother of Davenport, baby rejects lavish settlement offer. Amelia returned to her cramped room at the halfway house that night, emotionally drained, the weight of the world on her shoulders. Though she believed, deep in her soul, that she was making the right choices for Lily, fear, like a persistent rodent, gnawed at her. She worried about the immense financial might of the Vanderbilt family, their ability to drag her through an endless, exhausting legal process to bury her in paperwork and appeals. Would she eventually be forced into a settlement she didn't want, just to keep her daughter secure, to provide some semblance of stability? After putting Lily to sleep, her tiny face serene in the dim light, Amelia found a quiet moment to look through a few old, faded photographs she had managed to keep. She remembered happier days, times when Ethan would spin her around their sun-drenched living room while jazz music played softly in the background, his laughter echoing hers. Those memories felt like they belonged to a different lifetime, a different woman. Resolute and exhausted, but unbowed, she reminded herself of the life she wanted to build for her daughter, a life free from fear, from want, and from uncertainty. Tensions soared as the formal custody hearing approached. Judge Davies had ordered a child services evaluation to assess both parents' living conditions and, crucially, their emotional capacity to care for Lily. A social worker named Emily Carter, a kind woman with observant eyes, visited Amelia's humble accommodations, noting the cleanliness, the obvious warmth and affection, and a strong, undeniable bond between mother and child, despite the severely limited resources. A week later, Emily Carter arrived at Ethan's opulent penthouse, a sprawling apartment located in a prestigious, doorman-guarded building overlooking Central Park. The interior was immaculate, a symphony of polished marble floors, soaring ceilings, museum-quality art, and an unobstructed, breathtaking view of the city skyline. But as Emily carefully, professionally, asked Ethan questions about his intended role as a father, his vision for Lily's upbringing, his responses seemed practiced, almost rehearsed, as if guided by extensive legal coaching and PR advice. Behind the scenes, Ethan struggled, torn between conflicting desires and pressures. On one hand, he genuinely, surprisingly, wanted to connect with the daughter he'd only just discovered, a tiny human being who shared his blood. On the other, he felt immense, unrelenting pressure from his family, particularly his stepmother, and from his demanding corporate obligations. There were times he'd slip away to his private, soundproofed office, gazing at the stark paternity test results, the irrefutable proof of his fatherhood, and wondering what kind of father he could possibly be if he barely knew how to slow down, how to prioritize something other than the next business deal. When Emily Carter concluded her visits, she prepared a thorough, detailed report for the court, a document that would weigh heavily in determining the complex custody arrangements. Both Amelia and Ethan braced themselves, their futures and Lily's, hanging in the balance, not knowing which way the scales of justice would ultimately tip. The morning of the custody hearing dawned gray and chilly, the weather reflecting the somber mood that enveloped the courthouse. Journalists and photographers lined the entrance, their cameras flashing with relentless, intrusive curiosity, their microphones thrust forward. Amelia felt faint, her stomach churning from a toxic mix of nerves and residual hunger. She'd skipped breakfast, her appetite completely gone, replaced by a knot of anxiety. In the packed courtroom, Judge Davies wasted no time, his demeanor serious and focused. Emily Carter's report, read aloud in a clear, steady voice, highlighted that while Ethan Vanderbilt could undoubtedly offer financial stability and a luxurious, privileged environment, he had yet to demonstrate any hands-on parenting skills or a deep, intuitive understanding of a baby's needs. Amelia, on the other hand, had been the sole, consistent caregiver, albeit in impoverished, challenging circumstances, showing unwavering devotion and prioritizing the child's welfare above all else. Jessica Morgan argued passionately, her voice ringing with conviction, that Lily deserved not just money, but emotional security, stability, and the constant presence of her primary attachment figure. She insisted, forcefully, that uprooting the infant from her mother's dedicated care at such a crucial developmental stage would be deeply traumatic and detrimental. Michael Preston countered, emphasizing Ethan's vast resources, his willingness to employ the best nannies, tutors, and medical specialists money could buy. He framed it as an unparalleled opportunity for Lily to flourish, to have access to advantages that Amelia, with her limited means, could never provide. Judge Davies listened carefully, his face unreadable, his gaze occasionally shifting between the two parents. After hours of testimony, expert opinions, and intense legal arguments, he announced, his voice resonating through the silent courtroom, that he would take the matter under advisement. The final decision, he stated, will be pronounced in 1 week's time. Amelia exited the courtroom with her heart pounding, her legs feeling like lead, wondering if she was about to lose the only family she had left, the tiny, precious daughter who was her entire world. As the days ticked by with agonizing slowness, Amelia found herself swinging violently between fragile, tentative hope and crushing, overwhelming dread. The media coverage intensified, becoming almost unbearable. She even discovered online forums where anonymous people debated her life, her choices, her motives, like a character in a tawdry soap opera. Some commenters, cruel and uninformed, branded her a gold digger, a calculating opportunist. Others, more sympathetic, called Ethan a deadbeat father, a heartless millionaire. Ethan, meanwhile, retreated further into isolation, the public scrutiny taking its toll. He canceled public appearances, delegated more board responsibilities to trusted VPs, and spent long, solitary hours alone in his cavernous penthouse, the silence amplifying his thoughts. Each evening, he replayed memories of Amelia in his mind, the warmth of her laughter, the easy way she moved, the quiet strength she possessed even in the face of adversity. Guilt, sharp and coiling, twisted within him, especially when he thought about how he'd cut her off so abruptly, so callously, without a word of explanation, without even a backward glance. One evening, rummaging through old boxes in a forgotten closet, searching for some unrelated document, Ethan stumbled upon a small, unassuming photo album. Tucked inside was a note, a small, folded piece of paper. Amelia had once slipped it into his briefcase, a small letter filled with her simple, heartfelt dreams for their future together. Her neat, familiar handwriting read, "I believe in you, Ethan. I believe in us. Always." Ethan felt tears, hot and unexpected, sting his eyes. He realized, perhaps too late, the true cost of his misguided attempts to shield his inheritance, his reputation, his carefully constructed image. He had sacrificed the one person who had truly, unconditionally believed in his better self. With a renewed, albeit hesitant, determination, Ethan picked up the phone and dialed David Miller's number. "I want to make this right, David," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, feeling the profound weight of each syllable. "Tell me how. Tell me what I need to do." The next day, Jessica Morgan's office phone rang. On the line was David Miller, proposing a private, informal meeting between Ethan and Amelia without the glaring, distorting lens of the media and without the adversarial influence of their respective attorneys. Jessica hesitated, naturally wary, but eventually agreed, sensing a subtle shift, a potential opening for genuine dialogue that might bridge the enormous chasm between them. Amelia was deeply skeptical, her trust in Ethan shattered. She didn't want another tense meeting where Ethan's lawyer waved large checks in her face, attempting to buy her silence or her child. But Jessica, with her calm, persuasive reasoning, convinced her that maybe, just maybe, Ethan had finally seen the light, had finally understood the gravity of his actions. So, on a chilly Friday evening, under the discreet, carefully orchestrated arrangement of David and Jessica, Amelia took a taxi to a small, unassuming cafe in a quiet, out-of-the-way part of town. Ethan was already there, hunched over a small table near the window, a cup of coffee, long gone cold, before him. He stood up the moment Amelia entered, his eyes filled with a nervous apprehension, immediately darting to the infant carrier she held in her arms. Lily was asleep, her tiny, perfect nose peeking out from beneath a soft, knitted pink hat. For a tense, stretched moment, neither spoke, the air thick with unspoken words, regrets, and accusations. Then, in a hushed, almost reverent tone, Ethan broke the silence. She's beautiful." He hesitantly reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and brushed a gentle fingertip across Lily's tiny, curled hand. Amelia's heart constricted, a painful squeeze. In that unguarded moment, she saw not the powerful millionaire heir, the corporate titan, but a father astonished and humbled by the sight of his child. They sat down, words tumbling out hesitantly at first, like stones dislodged by a tentative stream, but soon flowing more freely. Apologies, raw and unvarnished. Regrets, heavy and profound. Confessions of fear, of pride, of monumental misjudgment. Outside, the city wind howled, a mournful sound, but inside that modest, quiet cafe, a fragile, tentative truce began to form, the first delicate shoots of understanding pushing through the frozen ground of their shared pain. Amelia left the cafe hours later feeling as if she had just stepped off an emotional roller coaster, drained but also strangely lighter. She and Ethan had talked for hours, laying bare the lost months. Her homelessness, the terrifying labor in the alley, his blind ambition, his fear of vulnerability, and the manipulative, self-serving counsel of those around him, including his stepmother. Despite her lingering anger, the deep scars of his betrayal, she couldn't deny that Ethan seemed genuine in his remorse, his eyes brimming with unshed emotion whenever Lily made a tiny, cooing sound in her sleep. Though no concrete, legally binding agreement was forged that night, they had taken a significant step closer to understanding, to finding a path forward. Ethan promised Amelia, his voice earnest, that he would no longer hide behind the corporate fortress of Vanderbilt Industries, no longer allow fear or pride to dictate his actions concerning their daughter. If the court granted joint custody or even significant visitation, he vowed to be a present, active father to ensure that Lily knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he loved her. That night, Amelia returned to the shelter, Lily asleep and peaceful in her arms. She felt profoundly conflicted. Her logical brain, the part that had learned caution through bitter experience, still cautioned her not to let her guard down, reminding her of the immense heartbreak she'd endured, the promises broken. Yet her heart, a more forgiving, resilient organ, yearned to believe that Ethan could, indeed, be the partner and father he once promised, long ago, to be. A new, unsettling thought nestled into her mind. Perhaps the best scenario for Lily, the one that would truly serve her interests, would be a cooperative, respectful co-parenting relationship. But cooperation required trust, and trust was something they'd both shattered in different ways. For now, all she could do was wait for the court's ruling and see if Ethan's actions, in the coming days and weeks, would match his newfound words of contrition and commitment. On the day of the final custody decision, the tension within the packed courtroom was palpable, a thick, almost suffocating blanket. Lawyers stood at their respective tables, their expressions unreadable, thick files and legal documents stacked high before them. Photographers and reporters waited impatiently outside, hungry for a dramatic shot, a soundbite that could capture the raw emotion of victory or defeat. Judge Davies took his seat, his gaze sweeping the room before he began, his voice calm but authoritative. In the matter of Vanderbilt versus Hayes, regarding the custody of the minor child, Lily Hayes, I have reviewed the Child Services report, listened carefully to the testimony of both parties, and considered, above all else, the best interests of the child. His voice resonated with an undeniable authority, each word carrying immense weight. Amelia clenched her hands tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. Jessica placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a small gesture of support. Ethan sat across from them, his posture rigid, his face pale but composed. The judge explained, in clear, concise terms, that Lily deserved the love, care, and active involvement of both her parents, provided each demonstrated fitness and genuine, unwavering commitment to her well-being. To that end, Judge Davies continued, his gaze stern, I am granting joint legal custody to both parties. Physical custody will remain primarily with Ms. Hayes, given her demonstrated role as the primary caregiver and the critical importance of stability for a child of this age. Mr. Vanderbilt is granted generous visitation rights, with a formal review scheduled in 6 months to determine if expanded custody is appropriate based on his demonstrated involvement and commitment. Amelia felt a surge of overwhelming relief wash over her, so potent it almost made her dizzy. Tears, hot and unrestrained, pooled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. Ethan exhaled sharply, a complex mix of relief, disappointment, and a newfound resolve settling over him. The gavel's echo, sharp and final, signaled not an end, but a new, uncertain chapter in their unfolding, complicated saga. In the days and weeks that followed the court's decision, Ethan took immediate, decisive steps to prove his commitment, to demonstrate that his change of heart was real. He arranged for a modest but comfortable, fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment for Amelia and Lily in a safe, family-friendly neighborhood, covering the lease and all utilities so they no longer had to rely on the cramped, insecure quarters of the shelter or the halfway house. Initially, Amelia resisted, her pride still a formidable barrier. She worried that accepting Ethan's help would become a new kind of chain, binding her to his will, making her dependent. But Jessica gently, wisely, counseled that stable, secure housing was essential for Lily's well-being and for Amelia's peace of mind, and Amelia, after much internal debate, begrudgingly, gratefully accepted. Still, she set firm boundaries. She refused to accept a personal driver, a lavish allowance, or a credit card with an unlimited spending limit. I want to stand on my own 2 feet, Ethan she insisted, her voice firm. "I need to do this for myself and for Lily." Ethan, to his credit, respected that choice, albeit with a lingering paternal concern for their comfort. For Ethan, transitioning into active fatherhood was a humbling and, at times, profoundly awkward experience. He'd show up on weekends for his scheduled visitations, often laden with groceries, brightly colored baby toys, and stacks of books he was diligently reading on how to care for infants, from sleep schedules to solid food introductions. He took to heart every detail, every piece of advice Amelia offered, listening with an uncharacteristic attentiveness. How to hold Lily correctly to support her head, how to burp her effectively after feedings, how to recognize her different cries, the hungry cry, the tired cry, the cry that simply meant she needed a cuddle. Bit by bit, visit by visit, he caught glimpses of the daily, relentless struggles Amelia had endured and continued to endure. The exhausting midnight feedings, the endless cycle of diapers, the constant, gnawing worry over money, over Lily's health, over their future. With each late-night bottle, he learned to prepare during his weekend visits, and each silly lullaby, he awkwardly learned to hum. Ethan felt a foreign, yet deeply comforting sense of purpose awakening within him, a connection he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. As Lily reached 6 months old, her infectious giggles and happy coos transformed the once quiet, sterile apartment into a place of genuine joy and burgeoning promise. Amelia, with Lily now a little older and Ethan providing consistent child support, found part-time work at a local community center, helping to organize charity drives and support programs for families in need, a role that resonated deeply with her own recent, harrowing experiences. With Ethan's financial support covering childcare during her work hours, she could finally begin to balance work and motherhood, reclaiming a small piece of her independence. Their co-parenting arrangement wasn't without its challenges, its inevitable bumps in the road. Ethan's demanding schedule at Vanderbilt Industries sometimes caused him to be late for visits, or occasionally to miss them entirely, igniting Amelia's frustration and dredging up old anxieties. In turn, Amelia's fierce pride often made it difficult for her to accept gifts or assistance beyond the bare minimum stipulated by the court, even when Ethan's intentions were clearly good. They argued occasionally, old wounds and deep-seated mistrust surfacing at the worst, most inconvenient moments, their voices sometimes sharp with remembered pain. Yet, amid the strain, the misunderstandings, and the careful navigation of their new reality, a growing, surprising sense of mutual respect began to emerge. Ethan discovered, with a sense of awe, that being a father wasn't just about providing resources, about writing checks. It was about being present, truly present, listening with genuine interest to the stories of Lily's milestones, no matter how small. Her first determined attempt at crawling, her delighted discovery of how to clap her tiny hands with unbridled joy. Amelia, in turn, learned, slowly and cautiously, that she could lean on someone else, just a little, without forfeiting her hard-won independence or her core identity. Slowly but steadily, they formed a tentative, evolving partnership, their primary focus always on Lily's happiness and well-being. And in fleeting, unguarded moments, they caught themselves smiling at each other over Lily's head, a shared glance of amusement or affection, recalling a lost, fragile tenderness that once bound them together. Just when things seemed to be reaching a fragile, hopeful equilibrium, fate, as it often does, threw another unexpected curveball. A coldly formal letter arrived from the Vanderbilt family's legal team, informing Ethan that his extended family, led by his ambitious and disapproving stepmother, Victoria, intended to challenge his ability to lead Vanderbilt Industries effectively. Rumors of scandal, of poor judgment and distracted leadership, swirled among influential board members and key investors. The story of Ethan's love child and the ensuing public custody battle, they argued, had dampened investor confidence, and certain factions within the company, sensing weakness, wanted him removed as CEO before the upcoming annual shareholder meeting. Ethan felt torn, the weight of the world once again pressing down on him. The pressure from the board, from his family, forced him into endless, exhausting strategy sessions, high-stakes meetings that stretched late into the night, leaving him little time or energy for his newly formed, still fragile paternal duties. Stress and sleepless nights once again plagued him, a familiar, unwelcome companion. Only this time, the thought of losing his daughter's blossoming trust, the tentative connection they were building, felt infinitely more terrifying than losing the company, than losing his C-suite title. Amelia noticed Ethan's sudden, unexplained absences, the unread texts, the last-minute cancellations of his visits with Lily. Old anxieties, sharp and familiar, gnawed at her. Was he pulling away again, retreating into his corporate shell now that life had become too complicated, too messy? But one night, Ethan showed up at the apartment unannounced, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes dark with exhaustion and worry. "Amelia," he said quietly, his voice hoarse, "they're trying to oust me from the company. If I lose my position, I lose my standing, and with that, I might lose credibility in court if custody is revisited if Victoria tries to make a move." In that raw, vulnerable moment, Amelia saw past his polished, millionaire exterior to the frightened, overwhelmed man she once loved, the man who was now, undeniably, Lily's father. She felt a surprising rush of sympathy, a pang of understanding, remembering her own desperate struggles for survival, her own battles against seemingly insurmountable odds. They were both fighting battles, each in a different arena, but connected inextricably by the same powerful, driving force: Lily's future, her happiness, her security. Determined not to let external forces or scheming relatives tear them apart again, Ethan and Amelia found themselves working together, supporting each other in an unexpected, almost unconscious way. While Ethan battled boardroom politics, fending off attacks on his leadership, Amelia, in her own quiet, dignified manner, stepped forward to defend him publicly. She agreed to give a small, carefully worded interview to a local, reputable reporter, someone she trusted from her volunteer work at the community center, clarifying that Ethan, despite their painful history, was not the villain that the tabloids, and perhaps his own family, painted him to be. "I won't deny our history is complicated, painful even," Amelia said, cradling Lily, now dozing peacefully on her lap during the televised interview, her voice calm and steady. "But Ethan Vanderbilt has been stepping up as a father. He's learning. He's trying. He's present for our daughter. And that, to me, means more than his net worth or his corporate title ever could." The interview, surprisingly, went viral, eliciting a spectrum of mixed reactions. Some cynical commentators claimed Amelia had been bought off, that she was playing a long game. Others, however, admired her honesty, her grace under pressure. Yet, the simple, undeniable act of standing up for Ethan, of acknowledging his efforts, resonated with key investors and some wavering board members who saw a different, more human side of him, a man willing to own his mistakes, to face his responsibilities, and to grow from them. As the annual shareholder meeting approached, the tension mounted, palpable throughout the city's financial district. Ethan prepared detailed presentations, gathered supportive statements from business allies, and readied a contingency plan if all else failed, his future hanging precariously in the balance. At the same time, Amelia braced herself for the possibility that the fragile stability they'd just begun to enjoy, the tentative peace they'd found, might come crashing down should Ethan lose control of Vanderbilt Industries, and potentially his ability to provide for Lily. The day of a shareholder meeting arrived with all the drama and intensity of a high-stakes Hollywood showdown. The main boardroom at Vanderbilt Industries was buzzing with tension, an undercurrent of anticipation and anxiety. Rows of expensive leather chairs faced a large, illuminated screen displaying complex financial graphs and optimistic corporate forecasts. Major investors from across the globe dialed in via secure video conference, their faces appearing on smaller screens around the room. Ethan presented his case, offering a transparent, detailed look at Vanderbilt Industries' performance under his leadership, highlighting growth metrics, successful initiatives, and ambitious future plans. His voice was calm but firm, his arguments well-reasoned, addressing the recent controversies head-on, without defensiveness. He even touched upon the paternity case, emphasizing that while the media had predictably sensationalized his personal life, it had not, in any way, impacted the company's profitability or its strategic vision. Then, one by one, board members and major shareholders asked questions, some supportive, others pointedly accusatory, their words like carefully aimed arrows. Victoria Vanderbilt, his stepmother, elegant and icy, led the charge to remove him, claiming, with thinly veiled disdain, that he lacked the moral fiber, the unimpeachable character, required to represent the esteemed Vanderbilt company. Ethan countered calmly, respectfully, reminding everyone that personal matters, while unfortunate, should not outweigh proven professional competence and a strong track record of success. In a surprising, strategic twist, David Miller, Ethan's personal attorney and steadfast friend, stood to share unsolicited statement from several prominent philanthropic organizations, praising Ethan's renewed and substantial commitment to social causes, some of which Amelia, through her work at the community center, had quietly encouraged him to support. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere in the room began to shift, the tide turning in Ethan's favor. By the time the final, confidential vote was taken and the results tabulated, it was announced to a hushed room that Ethan Vanderbilt would retain his position as CEO of Vanderbilt Industries, winning by a narrow but decisive margin. Relief, immense and profound, washed over him. But as he walked out of the boardroom, past the murmuring executives and the relieved faces of his allies, he knew this was only one victory in a much larger, more personal battle for redemption, for trust, and for his daughter's future. That evening, Ethan arrived at Amelia's apartment, not with his usual entourage of assistants or drivers, but alone, holding a simple, elegant bouquet of lilies, her favorite flower. While the gesture was small, almost understated, it was the first time in months, perhaps years, he'd shown up for a reason other than strictly scheduled fatherly duties or urgent crisis management. Amelia welcomed him inside, noticing the deep weariness etched on his face, but also a new lightness in his eyes. They sat in the small, cozy living room, the soft, melodic sound of Lily's lullaby machine humming gently from the bedroom. Ethan recounted the day's dramatic events, the tension, the accusations, the agonizing wait for the final vote. Amelia listened, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and a surprising, unfamiliar pride in him, relieved that he'd managed to hold on to his leadership role, not for the sake of the money, but for the stability it offered Lily. In the quiet, comfortable silence that followed, she found herself reminiscing aloud, unexpectedly, about their early days, the carefree time before everything fell apart. The time they impulsively tried tandem skydiving in Nevada, the exhilaration and the shared fear. The quiet, lazy Sunday mornings, sipping coffee on his sun-drenched penthouse balcony, overlooking the city. The silly, private jokes he would whisper just to make her laugh until her sides ached. Ethan smiled sadly, a wistful expression on his face, acknowledging, with a newfound humility, how far they had strayed from those innocent, joyful moments. A flicker of profound vulnerability, raw and undisguised, passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of shared history and shared pain. For Amelia, it was both comforting and deeply unsettling. She realized, with a pang, that they were no longer the starry-eyed, naive couple they once were. Too many harsh, unforgiving realities had tested and nearly destroyed their bond. Yet in that fleeting, tender moment, the possibility of forging a new kind of relationship, one built not on youthful infatuation, but on hard-won honesty, mutual respect, and shared responsibility, didn't seem so impossible after all. Over the following weeks and months, Ethan gradually, intentionally, transitioned into a more present, engaged, and joyful father. no longer buried beneath the suffocating avalanche of corporate obligations and family expectations. He restructured his demanding schedule, hiring trusted, competent deputies to manage the day-to-day operations of Vanderbilt Industries, a move that surprised many but earned him quiet respect from others. That courageous decision gave him something money, for all its power, couldn't buy: time. Precious, irreplaceable time. And he poured that time, that newly freed energy, into being with Lily, into learning who she was, into simply being her dad. He arrived early on his scheduled weekends, often surprising Amelia with breakfast in hand, usually slightly cold takeout bagels or lukewarm coffee. But the thought, the effort, warmed her more than any five-star meal could. Together, they experienced the small, ordinary milestones that most parents took for granted, but which felt extraordinary to them. Ethan was there, his face alight with pure joy, when Lily giggled uncontrollably at her first messy, slippery bubble bath. He was there, with encouraging words and a safety net of outstretched hands, when she tried to crawl, only to topple face first, unharmed, onto a plush, forgiving rug. He laughed with her, cheered her on, and even, to Amelia's amused surprise, cried a few happy tears when Lily, looking directly at him, uttered her first, clear word, "Dada." Amelia teased him gently for his uncharacteristic sentimentality, but secretly, she was deeply touched by how profoundly, how completely, he cared. The community center where Amelia worked with such passion was preparing for its biggest event of the year, a charity gala aimed at supporting homeless mothers and their children, providing them with shelter, resources, and a path to independence. It was a cause deeply, intensely personal to her, and she'd spent months, countless hours, helping to organize every minute detail, from securing donations to arranging entertainment. Nervously, her heart fluttering, she handed Ethan an invitation one evening during one of his visits. "You don't have to come," she said quickly, almost dismissively, afraid of his potential refusal, or worse, his pity. "It's small, nothing like the grand Davenport Foundation galas you're used to, just a local community effort." Ethan studied the simple, heartfelt invitation, a warm smile touching his lips. "Amelia," he said, his voice sincere, "if this matters to you, it matters to me. Of course I'll be there." He insisted on making a substantial donation, but she was firm, her independence a well-guarded fortress. "If you donate, do it anonymously," she requested. "I don't want anyone to think I'm parading you around for donations or using your name." He smiled, understanding her pride. "Then I'll simply show up, support your incredible work, and clap the loudest when you take the mic to give your speech." At the gala, held in the brightly decorated but humble hall of the community center, Amelia wore a simple yet elegant navy blue dress, borrowed from the center's carefully curated donation wardrobe. She moved gracefully between guests, local business owners, community leaders, and grateful recipients of the center's services, sharing her own story without embellishing the tragedy or martyring herself. Her words honest and inspiring. Sometimes, she told one particularly engaged donor, her eyes briefly glancing toward Lily, sleeping peacefully in her stroller nearby, tended by a trusted volunteer, "Life breaks you open in the most painful ways so that the light can finally get in." Ethan, standing at the edge of the modest crowd, dressed impeccably but without ostentation, watched her in awe, his heart swelling with a profound admiration. The woman he once saw, perhaps selfishly, only through the narrow lens of romance and youthful desire, had transformed, had blossomed into something even more formidable, more beautiful, an advocate, a leader, a survivor, a beacon of hope for others. After her powerful, moving speech, which ended with a sustained, heartfelt standing ovation, Amelia found Ethan waiting for her in the hallway, holding 2 plastic cups of punch and looking slightly, endearingly, overwhelmed by the sheer emotion in the room. "You were incredible, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with genuine admiration. "Honestly, I've never been prouder of anyone in my entire life." Amelia looked at him, a soft smile touching her lips, unsure, for a moment, how to respond. So much had passed between them: betrayal, distance, anger, hardship. But in that moment, standing in the warm, bustling hallway of the community center, she saw none of it in his eyes. She saw a man slowly, painstakingly shedding his armor, a man earnestly, humbly, trying to rebuild what he had once so carelessly, so callously destroyed. Later that night, after the successful event, after the last guest had departed and Lily was tucked soundly in her crib, they sat on Amelia's comfortable, slightly worn couch, a comfortable silence enveloping them. They spoke of dreams, not just for their daughter, who represented so much hope for them both, but for themselves. Not the extravagant, materialistic kind from their past, but quiet, meaningful ones. Amelia talked of expanding the community center, starting a literacy program for underserved children. Ethan, surprisingly, spoke of wanting to mentor young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. They even mused about traveling someday, as a family, with Lily, showing her the world, or perhaps, even more surprisingly, writing a children's book together, a whimsical tale of resilience and love. Though the future remained unwritten, uncertain in its details, the bond between them deepened, solidified, forged not through the fleeting fires of passionate romance, but through the enduring strength of shared experience, hard-won resilience, and a mutual commitment to their daughter. And from that sacred, hallowed place of shared healing, something new, something precious and strong began to bloom. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden and crimson leaves spiraled down from the majestic trees lining Central Park, Ethan took Amelia and Lily on a quiet, unhurried outing to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The air carried the faint, sweet scent of pine and damp earth, and the joyful laughter of nearby families, enjoying the rare, perfect sunny day, floated on the gentle breeze. Lily, now a toddler full of boundless energy and insatiable curiosity, sat perched on Ethan's shoulders, wide-eyed at every fluttering leaf and vibrant blooming petal, pointing and babbling in pure, unadulterated delight. Amelia walked beside them, a contented smile playing on her lips, her hand occasionally brushing Ethan's as they strolled. Their steps were easy, unhurried, a comfortable rhythm established over many months of shared parenting and rediscovered friendship. The sunlight glinted through the canopy of trees, casting shifting, dappled patterns on the winding path. It felt almost surreal, after all the tumultuous months of legal battles, sleepless nights, and profound heartbreak, to be here together in a moment so peaceful, so ordinary, so undisturbed. They paused near a small, serene pond where ducks drifted lazily across the shimmering surface. Ethan, ever prepared, reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small bag of breadcrumbs he'd thoughtfully brought along. "Let's give her her first official duck feeding memory," he said, his eyes crinkling with a smile as he handed a few crumbs to Amelia and then carefully helped Lily toss hers into the water, her squeals of glee echoing in the crisp air. When they found a shaded, secluded bench beneath a tall, ancient oak tree, Amelia sat down and leaned back, a sigh of pure contentment escaping her lips, watching as Ethan continued to entertain Lily, making silly faces and animated animal sounds, his laughter mingling with their daughters. The bond between father and daughter had grown stronger than Amelia could have ever imagined, an undeniable, deeply genuine connection built on love, patience, and countless shared moments. She couldn't deny how far Ethan had come, not just in his court-mandated appearances or his financial responsibility, but in the small, daily, unglamorous, yet profoundly important moments of fatherhood. Ethan eventually joined her on the bench, sitting close, their shoulders touching, a comfortable, familiar proximity. There was a long, peaceful silence before he spoke, his voice soft, thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he said, his eyes fixed on Lily, who was now happily playing with a fallen acorn in her tiny hands, "about everything. About us. How far we've come from that alley, from the courtroom, and how far I still needed to go. How much I needed to learn." Amelia turned her head toward him, her expression gentle, listening intently. I know, I can't rewrite the past. Amelia, he continued, his voice filled with a quiet sincerity that resonated deep within her. I can never erase the pain I caused you, but I want to build something better, something real for her and for us. I'm not talking about some fairy tale, perfect family wrapped in a pretty bow. I know we're not there. Maybe we'll never be perfect, but maybe we could try again. Not just as co-parents, navigating schedules and responsibilities, but as something more, as partners in every sense of the word. Amelia felt her breath catch slightly, her heart giving a hopeful flutter. She looked down at their hands, which had somehow found their way together, fingers lightly intertwined, remembering every painful low point, the cold, terrifying alley, the sterile, intimidating courtroom, the lonely, desperate nights when she doubted she could survive another day. And yet, here he was beside her, not the arrogant, detached millionaire she had once feared and resented, but a man transformed, a man learning to love with humility, with patience, and with unwavering care. I don't have an easy answer right now, Ethan, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, brushing a wind-blown curl from her face. There's still so much, but she paused, then met his hopeful gaze, her own eyes shining. I'm willing to keep walking forward with you. One step at a time. Together. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes clearly moved, a slow, radiant smile spreading across his face. That's all I could ever hope for, Amelia. That's more than enough. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and the shadows lengthened across the gardens, the three of them sat in quiet, peaceful harmony, watching the ducks glide gracefully across the darkening pond. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, not in the traditional sense, but it was real. It was earned. It was healing. And it was, most importantly, their journey from the depths of despair to this quiet moment of profound hope was a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative magic of a child's unconditional love. Lily had not only brought them together, but had, in her own innocent way, shown them the path back to each other, a path paved with patience, understanding, and the promise of a future built on a foundation far stronger than they had ever known before. And as they walked out of the gardens, hand in hand, with Lily babbling happily between them, they knew, with a certainty that settled deep in their souls, that their story was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. If this story of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might find inspiration in it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that uplift and inspire. Thank you for watching.